to have the opportunity to speak to you today and be invited by AI for people to address you on the role LFAI is playing and what we're doing in terms of supporting open source AI innovation and collaboration within that ecosystem. So one of the my favorite slides really to present is the LFAI Landscape. So the LFAI Landscape is a tool that we created in LFAI to help us see the different projects that are existing within that open source AI ecosystem. And as you can see on the screen, the landscape is divided into multiple categories, such as machine learning, deep learning, models, security, trusted AI, and many other categories. And each of these categories is also further divided into smaller subcategories. So if you look at that landscape, you realize, there are probably over 250 projects. And of course, these are the top tier projects. There are, of course, thousands of other projects in the within that ecosystem. However, we only focus and add to the landscape kind of top tier projects based on their GitHub activities, number of stars, and so on. And what's really interesting as you look across these different subcategories is that in each of these subcategories, there are a number of different projects. So if you're looking for a deep learning framework, you have maybe 12 options to pick from. If you're looking for reinforcement learning library, you have 9 options, different projects. If you're looking for AI explainability tooling or libraries, you have probably 9 or 10 different tools. So there's a lot of kind of fragmentation across the board where a lot of these projects are providing or aim to provide common functionalities. And there's a lot of overlap between these different projects within that same category. However, one of the remarks I would like to share with you is that this is an extremely active and growing ecosystem. When we started the landscape years ago, we were able to capture about 85 projects. Today, we're north of 250 projects that represent over 150 companies that started or created these projects, and with over 30,000 active developers contributing consistently to these 250 projects you see on the screen. So it's an extremely thriving ecosystem. And one of the blowing statistics that I track is the lines of code created on a weekly basis. So what you see on the screen represents about 400 million lines of code across these 250 plus projects. And the pace at which development happens is just incredible. There's approximately 1 million lines of code added almost on a weekly basis. So you can see how fast the development is going. However, with all of these really positive things that we can observe, the ecosystem has some challenges. I will start from the bottom of the screen. I mentioned already about the lack of fragmentation or the fragmentation across these different categories, but also lack of integration across these different projects, just because the number of projects is so large that creating integration and collaboration across these different projects is really a challenge. Of course, there are governance challenges. So many of these projects started as proprietary efforts that were then open source. So many of these projects don't have any form of governance. Some projects have some sort of governance, but in most cases, it favors the creator of the project or the company who open sourced the project. So governance is always a challenge. A lot of these projects, as I mentioned, were developed as a specific answer to a product need. And then the company or companies behind the project decided to do a spin-off to open source to leverage the engineering resources, the network effect of open source. So that explains some of the redundancy that we see across the board. And when projects succeed and start growing, it becomes really a challenge on how to manage the project assets when you have 10, 15, 20 different companies involved in a given project. And these companies actually compete at a commercial level. So who's going to manage the website, the IT infrastructure, who's going to pay for the different administrative tasks that needs to be done, and so on. And when you combine all of these different challenges, what you see at the top is what I typically referred to as a glass ceiling for project investment and adoption. What that means basically, or what that translates to, is if you are a company and you want to go and adopt an open source project for a product or a service, you need to make sure that the project has a lively community, that it has a proper governance that does not favor a specific company, that allows the opportunity for everyone to advance within the project, that everything within the project in terms of project assets is made available equally to everybody. And when some of these constraints or criteria are missing, companies are reluctant in adopting a certain technology for their products and services. And this is really how LFAI came about. So we are what we call an umbrella foundation under the Linux Foundation. So when you think of the Linux Foundation, you can think of it as a foundation of foundations. So under the Linux Foundation, short LF, we have a number of foundations. LFAI is one of them. We focus on open source AI. There's Cloud Native Computing Foundation, CNCF, that focuses on cloud native open source technologies. We have LF Edge, LF Network, Hyperledger, etc., etc. We all aim for the same thing: supporting collaboration and advancing innovation in our specific categories, whether it's cloud, networking, AI, automotive, and many other technology domains. So why are we aiming for harmonization across the ecosystem? For one, it allows us to have better interoperability and capabilities across these projects. So from an end user perspective, how nice is it for you if you pick project A and knowing that that project has great integration and interoperability with project B and C and D, that also you're going to adopt. So interoperability and driving integration across these different projects is a great motivation for us. Hosting projects under the same umbrella foundation, in this case LFAI, has been proven to be a great recipe to allow closer collaboration across these different projects. And we've tried that in the Linux Foundation for the past 15 plus years and has been extremely successful at this. And we're working to replicate that success in the open source AI ecosystem. From an end user perspective, we're looking to provide a unified guidance on the various projects, tools, integration across these projects, standardization, and of course, as everybody is going and into the process of infusing AI technologies in their product and services, we're looking to provide basically insights into the future of AI data and analytics as they tie together in being adopted across different industries. And for our members, as we are a member-driven organization, we're looking to provide greater efficiencies in terms of cost spending, supporting these different projects. So we've been around for about 2.5 years. So the foundation was kicked off in March of 2018 with one single project, the Alchemist project. And as you can see, I think this will be the last year we published the timeline as it's getting very busy. So you can see a lot of companies joining since we started, and I will touch on that later on. We grew from 1 project to 17 projects today. And we have a very active community in terms of events, meetups, and several community-driven events. In terms of governance and structure, we are structured, as you can see on the slide. On the left hand, we have the foundation governance. This is our governing board. And within the governing board, we have multiple committees that support the activities of the foundation: outreach, that's marketing, PR, events, etc., legal committee, strategy, and budget. In the middle, we have the Technical Coordination Committee, which is called the Technical Advisory Council, and under which we have 2 committees, the ML Workflow and Interoperability Committee and the Trusted AI. And on the right-hand side, we have the projects that we host in the foundation, the projects that we support and help to grow in terms of adoption and contribution. And one thing that is extremely important to note is that there is a complete separation of governance. So at the foundation level, there is absolutely no interference in how the projects are run, how the projects should work, the governance of the project, etc. Projects join the foundation, and from a governance perspective, they are completely independent from the governance of the foundation. It is the community that drives the project and not the foundation or its governing board. So our major efforts are focused in 5 areas: providing a neutral environment for collaboration across these different communities. We are a not-for-profit organization. We have an open governance. We provide IP clarity across everything we do. From a harmonization and interoperability perspective, we have a committee called the TAC that I mentioned previously that coordinates all technical activities across projects and drives the effort in terms of defining a unified machine learning workflow and interoperability across these different projects. We have a committee focused on trusted AI, of which AI for People is a member and very active, and I will mention more on this in a later slide. And our goal is to become the home of open source, trusted, and responsible AI. So anybody can actually participate in everything that I'm listing on the slide. We have several efforts in the space of data, models, and we also provide an open source marketplace. So if you have open source models that you want to advertise and put in a marketplace where people can use them, people can chain them with other models, etc. All of that is available from LFAI website. How do we, where do we focus our efforts? So we have 5 major efforts: providing a neutral environment that fosters collaboration across projects with companies, with government labs, other nonprofit organizations. We have efforts that focus on increasing harmonization and interoperability between projects. Most of these projects and efforts are really driven by our technical community, embodied by the Technical Advisory Council. And all of that effort is open. So anybody on this call, without being even a member of LFAI as a company or as an enterprise, can join these mailing lists, can join the calls and participate and be part of this effort. We have a committee called the Trusted AI Committee. This is one of the committees where AI for People is very active in. And this is where a lot of discussions happens, not just in terms of principles and guidance and directives for what constitute trust and responsible AI, but also in terms of tooling. How can we come up with tools that really audit and enforce these different guidelines that we define? We have several efforts in terms of data, models, and even we provide a marketplace, an open source marketplace for models where you can host your own models. There you can interlog them together or chain them, try them out, you can edit, etc., etc. It's an extremely rich environment for working with data and models. And of course, we provide funding and a number of services for the projects that we host. And we are in the process, we've developed training in the past, and we're in the process of continuing a new effort to add additional training courses that we publish on the edX platform. So when we started LFAI, we were 9 members. Today, we are at 24 members. We have 3 categories of membership: Premier member, which is board level member, general membership, and the associate membership. Associate membership, this is where AI for People is. This level of membership is dedicated for nonprofit organizations, other sister foundations, universities, government labs, etc. So if you are on this call, you work for a nonprofit organization, or you work for an R&D lab for a government agency, or you are a university, you are more than welcome to join us. There are no fees to join, and you will have access to all the services and all the activities that we do. So when we started LFAI, we had only a single project, Acumus. So Acumus joined us in March 2018. 2.5 years later on, we have today 17 projects covering different areas of AI. That's machine learning, deep learning. We have projects in terms of training framework. We have projects for reinforcement learning. We have search engine dedicated for metadata. We have projects focused on data. So there are projects basically that touch upon multiple categories within that open source AI ecosystem. So what does it mean for these projects to gain and become an incubation project in the foundation? So there are a lot of different things. The first one is the project would be hosted in neutral home. That's away from any vendor influence. We are not for-profit organization. And as a foundation, we take ownership of all the project assets. That's GitHub accounts, website, Twitter, social media accounts, build systems, etc., etc. And we become the owner of all project assets, so that not a single company or commercial interest would control that infrastructure for the project. We provide an open governance model for the project, so it becomes fair, open, and transparent for anybody to participate in and grow to become a maintainer and on the technical steering committee of that project. We provide project management support. We have a number of full-time staff who are more than eager to help and assist these projects. We also have a number of marketing efforts and event services that we provide, which I will cover later on, in addition to legal support. So once the project moves to the foundation, we become kind of the caretaker of the project, and that includes the legal aspects. So we support the project from that perspective as well. And one very interesting support that a lot of projects, especially in US and Europe, really like is that we have offices in Japan and offices in China with people on the ground that act as evangelists for LFAI projects, help us in growing the communities there, organizing events, and doing different meetups in the goal to grow the community of these projects within these geographies. So what's really interesting is, who's hosting projects in LFAI. As you can see, there are major tech companies, Amazon, Microsoft, Facebook, IBM, Uber, Lyft, and then from China, there's Tencent, Baidu. These are really gigantic companies in their own right, and Samsung from South Korea and so on. So when you look at this chart, you realize that, of course, these companies have 10,000 times the budget that we have in LFAI, maybe 100,000 times the budget we have. So they're not coming to LFAI because we provide a website for the project, or we create logos, or we provide mailing lists, or IT infrastructure. These companies come to host their project with the foundation because they trust that the foundation is able to enable these projects to grow and become sustainable on the long term, away from the perception that a single company controls the project. So if you are looking to host a project, I certainly would encourage you to consider LFAI for your open source AI projects. So we are a growing community. There are 17 projects, as I previously mentioned, before we got cut off. We have about 7.5 million lines of code, plus or minus. And what's really interesting is that we have about 50 organizations, companies that are actively contributing to this project, in addition to another 22 plus universities. And these statistics are a few days old. So of course, every couple of weeks, I go back and I check on the progress, and it's always continuously growing and growing. So I mentioned marketing and PR support. So in 2019, just to give you a quick context, we had 37 announcements. In 2020, in the first half alone, we did 26 announcements in support of our projects and members. And what kind of services we provide is pretty much anything under kind of the marketing umbrella of services. That's support in content creation, support in layout, support in creating posters, support in any kind of creative work for events, for booth, etc. And of course, we have our own blog that we run and social media. So we have basically marketing and kind of digital marketing support in all of these categories. We work very hard in growing the community of our projects. We do that via events. Today, we do them via virtual events. So we have different types of events depending on the target, depending on the location, depending on what we want to achieve. So we have what we call the LFAI Summit. We host a number of these co-located with major Linux Foundation events. We used to have booth as well, but this is now on hold since we're not doing physical events. We have what we call LFAI Track in the Open Source Summit. So the Open Source Summit is the largest open source event that the Linux Foundation organizes. We have 3 such events every year, one in North America, one in the EU, one in China. And in each of these events, we have an LFAI track that supports 18 to 20 talk over 3 days. We also have LFAI days, which are a single full day focused on collaboration across projects. And we host a number of these, plus many other events that we support. So you can see events are really kind of a cornerstone in how we build our communities, bring them together, and have them kind of to co-work and collaborate on physically or virtually on working together across these different projects. So how would you incubate a project with us? It's super easy. We would invite you to our TAC committee meeting. These meetings happen every 2 weeks, and we're generally booked 4 to 6 weeks in advance. So you have to plan early. You present the project. You present, what I tell people is consider it a conference presentation. Tell us about your project, what it does, what you've done so far, what's your roadmap, who's using your project, what you hope to achieve, and then how does it relate to LFAI. And then the committee at the end of the call makes a vote to accept the project into incubation. Once the project is accepted into incubation, we would then do what we call onboarding, which is basically bringing in the project to become a foundation project and integrating our services in support of the project in these different categories, legal, marketing, events, PM, support, etc., etc. So if you'd like to learn more, I have 2 links that I'm sharing with you on the slide. One in terms of what are the stages of and the life cycle of the project. So typically projects come in as incubation, and after a few months, depending on the project, they may graduate. They become a graduate project. And when we graduate a project, they become they have access to additional funding, basically, and we do a press release announcing, the project has achieved the graduation milestone, which is the signal to the market that this project has a mature technology that's been proven in large-scale deployment, and it's ready for deployment, and it has the full backing of the foundation, and so on. And the second thing really explains in really super details the various services that we offer for these projects to help them grow and become sustainable on the long term. You can stay connected with us via social media, on mailing list, and via our blog. A lot of our events are open to non-members, so you can participate in our TAC community every 2 weeks on their calls. These are completely open. You can participate on the mailing list. You can participate in the trusted and responsible AI activities, and multiple mailing lists that are available. Thank you very much for listening to me today, and for the invitation from AI for People. There are several links that are available if you'd like to learn more about LFAI Foundation. And of course, I'm sharing my email address with you. It's my first name, Ibrahim, @linuxfoundation.org. I understand I'm kind of almost out of time, and I apologize for the disconnect earlier. So if there's no time for questions today, my email address is ibrahim@linuxfoundation.org. So please feel free to send me your questions, and I'm more than happy to follow up with you offline. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. I'm also sharing here the link to the next workshop, which is about coding AI, and is starting now. So guys, feel free to jump there. A special thank to Ibrahim, because it's tough to connect in tough situations. So really, thank you for taking the time, especially to still be here. It's very, very appreciated. People are thanking us in the chat, which is it's nice. And you said, oh, perfect, that's your email. That's cool. So guys, if you want to maybe continue the Q&A, not live, but through email, do go ahead. Thank you, Ibrahim, for leaving your email. We recorded this talk. Now we'll stop the recording here.